history will judge. History will decide on what's going to happen.
Friday's meeting between Trump and Zelensky took place in a tense atmosphere.
During the negotiation, he will provide security guarantees to everyone.
If Putin again refuses to meet,
President Zelensky was very powerful in saying that he's ready to be anywhere.
Trump hints at security guarantees for both Ukraine and Russia. We'll talk about this with political analyst, European Leadership Network UK member, Alexandra Filippenko. Alexandra, glad to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Alexandra, yes, President Donald Trump has denied claims that he pressured his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, to agree to hand over all of Donbass to Russia. And according to Reuters, Friday's meeting between Trump and Zelensky took place in a tense atmosphere. Sources said the discussion ended with Trump's position on a deal where we are, effectively freezing the war along the current line of contact. What is President Trump's current stance on the war between Russia and Ukraine, in your opinion?
I think we should listen, first of all, to President Trump, not to sources, and especially the interview of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to 60 Minutes stressed that yet again, because they explained in that very, very interesting interview to 60 Minutes that they were in discussions while they read in the press that some sources were saying that Israel is not going to make a deal, Hamas is not going to make a deal, while they knew, being in the negotiation period, they knew that the situation was extremely different from what the press sources, the unnamed sources, that's what's important, the unnamed sources claimed. So if there are named sources, if there are credible sources, then of course we must first of all look at that. But I think that it's important right now, knowing that situation, that maybe even the American side, let's say, is giving out some information to the press deliberately to test the way the Russian side will approve or disapprove of something. I think, first of all, we should base our opinion on what President Trump is saying. And what he is saying, that there is no word, nothing about giving up the Donbass or giving up the whole region to Russia, for example. Many times, President Trump has said that everyone must stop, go back to their families, and then, as if we quote President Trump's post in Truth Social, history will judge. History will decide on what's going to happen. Or if we look at what Donald Trump said upon arriving to Florida after his meeting with President Zelensky, then two sides might talk about something. President Trump repeated the same claim while traveling yesterday night from Florida to Washington, D.C. He said that, yes, he believes that two sides must just stop at where they are, stop at the battle line, just give it some time, and then start talking, and then start negotiations or conversation or whatever, or however you can call it. But everyone needs to stop. Everyone needs to stop the killing, as President Trump puts it. So if we see at those claims, at those ideas of President Trump, I must say that to me, it's a reminder of what Ukraine's side has been talking about for quite some time. Just this ceasefire without any preliminary agreements. The Russian side never said yes to that. The Russian side has always been claiming that, first of all, there is needed to be a negotiation, something needs to be negotiated, and only after that negotiation, there might be a ceasefire. Or the Russian side said, of course, no, please give us all 4 regions, give us the Crimea, and then we will stop. Without that, then yes, without any negotiations, if everyone just gives up and gives everything that Russia wants or Russia claims. But President Trump right now is saying, on the one hand, he is being, let's say, very strict in his response. He's saying that, yes, nothing must continue. Just stop right now. But if we look at this idea, this is the idea that President Zelensky voiced many times, that the Ukrainian side suggested many times. It's a ceasefire. It's a stop. Everyone must stop and go back to their families, if we quote President Trump, and then start talking about something, and then start the negotiation. So this is the view of President Trump. And of course, those sources, those unnamed sources that President Trump claims were wrong about the Donbass region, about this idea that as President Trump said, it was not discussed. The Donbass, giving up the Donbass was not discussed with the Ukrainian side. Those sources, they also report on the way the conversation went on, and they said that the conversation was very tough and that President Trump sometimes even used profanity, some language that's not too diplomatic, let's say. But we know that, yes, President Trump sometimes can be quite harsh in his criticism and can be quite harsh behind closed doors, or even not behind closed doors, because sometimes he criticizes the press, and sometimes he criticizes those people that don't like some of the things that President Trump is doing. And I must say that the emotional side of the discussion might have been right, but the substantive side of the discussion seems to be a little off. And to me, it says that maybe even the White House itself gave out this information to the press in order to see the reaction from the Russian side, in order to test the reaction from the European Union. And we're seeing a powerful reaction from the European Union. We are seeing reaction from Germany, we're seeing reaction from Finland, from the UK, from all the parties involved. We are seeing quite a powerful reaction from the European Union, and that's exactly what President Trump wants to see. That's exactly what the American side wants to see. The European Union, the European countries in general, not necessarily European Union. I mean, of course, we also include the United Kingdom. They take more responsibility. They want them to take more responsibility. So this might have been some kind of a, let's say, game from the White House's side. But anyways, if it's true or if it's not, or if it's a real source or if it's not a real source, I mean, not real source by that, I mean that maybe that source was deliberate in what he or she said to the press in order to see the reaction from the other side of the pond. So it doesn't matter. The main thing is what we've been hearing from the White House itself, from the president himself, and that reaction is exactly what we've been hearing, the same as what we've been hearing from the Ukrainian side, that everyone must stop, ceasefire must take effect, and then they will start the conversations. So I think that's quite important to note that.
Alexandra, about guarantees. Yes, President Donald Trump, during the meeting with the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Friday, hinted at providing security guarantees to both Kyiv and Moscow, reports Reuters. According to their sources, during the meeting with Zelenskyy, Trump refused to provide Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, but considered granting security guarantees to both sides, which puzzled the Ukrainian delegation. Can the Trump team clarify what is meant by security guarantees for both Ukraine and Russia? What specific forms would these guarantees take, and under what conditions? The main question.
I think the security by security guarantees, President Trump, I guess, we can only guess here, means that if two sides stop, there will be no continuation of firing from either side. But we understand that, of course, Ukraine has never, every time there was a partial ceasefire or a ceasefire for a few days, Russia continued fighting on. Russia continued firing. But what President Trump is saying, and what he tries to showcase, that he's impartial. He's impartial. He's not standing on one side or the other side. He is fighting for both sides. As President Trump many times liked to stress, is that there are good people on both sides, and that he just wants the killing to end, and that there are soldiers dying on either side, and that everyone just needs to stay alive and stay where they are and don't move anywhere. And of course, so we've been hearing from the European Union and from European European parties in general, because again, I'm sorry for using European Union, I keep on forgetting about the UK. Of course, the UK is a very powerful supporter of Ukraine. So European countries in general, European countries were very powerful in saying all the time and continuously that we all need to go back to the internationally recognized borders, to the internationally recognized borders, meaning the borders of 1991. While the American side right now is saying that everyone must stop at where they are. The Europeans have been very powerful in saying that the support for Ukraine will not stop up until everyone is back to the recognized borders, to the internationally recognized borders. And of course, those internationally recognized borders do not include those occupied territories, those annexed territories, annexed by Russia territories, of course. So I guess what President Trump means is that while the negotiation is going on, while there's ceasefire, while the negotiation is going on, there will be no movement on the either side. There will be no movement from the Ukrainian side, even if, for example, Russian army collapses and Russian economy collapses and something happens. There still will be no movement. And of course, there must be no movement on the Russian side. So President Trump is trying to show himself as clearly impartial, clearly not standing on either side, clearly not being part of the confrontation, part of the war. He is trying to say that during the negotiation, he will provide security guarantees to everyone. And it reminds me of what we saw recently in the Middle East, because that signing, that agreement that the American side signed with Qatar, or when they signed security guarantees with Qatar, and we know that Qatar is the side that is representing the Hamas, and they were in direct contact with the Hamas terrorist group, while the United States is also providing security guarantees to Israel. Israel is the closest ally of the United States. So, and of course, Israel has been receiving American weapons, American support in every conflict. And we might see this situation as similar to what we're hearing now. Security guarantees for Ukraine, of course, American weapons for Ukraine, without a question. Training of people, without a question. Maybe even looking over that ceasefire, controlling the ceasefire from the American side, just as we are seeing the control of the ceasefire from the American side in the Middle East. Yes, that's very much possible. And at the same time, some kind of security guarantees for the other side, for the Russian side, even though it might look weird, to say the least. I don't want to use any stronger words, but actually stronger words come to mind when we think about the American side providing security guarantees for Russia that attacked Ukraine and has been attacking Ukraine for many, many years now, and that's attacked Georgia, and that's attacked different other countries. But this seems to me to be the same tactic as Donald Trump used in the Middle East, showing himself as impartial, showing himself as not standing on either side, although we, of course, see, as in the Middle East, of course, the United States being the ally of Israel, and here in Europe, seeing, of course, the United States providing weaponry and providing assistance to Ukraine. But while the negotiation is going on, President Trump is not within any group, let's say. So I think we should read this into this idea, or maybe even, the ideas of the American side, maybe not only President Trump, but I think this is what we should see in this idea of providing security guarantees.
Alexandra, Ukraine does not rule out that the meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin in Budapest could end with a bad scenario for Kyiv. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said during a meeting with a journalist. In particular, he once again emphasized that he would be ready to take part in the summit if invited. How would the host country, particularly if it is an EU or ICC member state, justify not detaining an individual officially charged with the war crimes and crimes against humanity? What do you think about this meeting?
Well, the Budapest meeting, if it is going to happen, and I'm putting a big, big if here, because unlike the meeting in Anchorage, unlike the meeting in Alaska, we are now seeing that there is a preliminary meeting before that between State Secretary Rubio and State Secretary, and of course the advisor on national security, Marco Rubio, and Sergei Lavrov from the Russian side. In Alaska, there was nothing like that preliminary to that meeting in Alaska. Right now, we're seeing that first ministers must meet, ministers must decide on something, they must come to some conclusion before that Budapest summit might take place. And of course, this is Hungary. Of course, we understand why it is Hungary, because a little bit less than 6 months ago, Hungary applied for leaving the ICC. They applied for leaving that statute, and the time hasn't passed, and not enough time has passed that they are still, as of now, they are still supposed to adhere to the agreements that they've signed previously, but they've applied to leaving the order of the ICC, and they applied to not actually being, let's say, responsible for taking care of the decisions made in The Hague. So we understand that in some time they won't be part of that treaty. They won't be part of that, again, of that decision. We can put it this way. So they won't need to arrest Vladimir Putin. But we're talking only about Hungary. And this is part of the European Union. And of course, we understand that other countries of the European Union might be more precise in that decision, and that they might try to get to an arrest. But here we can come back to your previous question about security guarantees, because those security guarantees for President Putin might be in effect from President Trump, because this is the way President Trump sees the situation. He is calling, just the way he's calling the dictator of Belarus, the very esteemed president, the same he's saying President Putin. He is repeating that again and again. And while the negotiation is going on, President Trump might suggest that we should put everything aside and right now only get to the negotiating part. And if other countries want to do something with Putin, if they want to arrest him or if they want to get him to The Hague, then this will not only hinder, this will put to an end any possibility for a real ending of the negotiation. Well, I myself have a different opinion, but if we comment on what Washington is saying and how the White House is seeing it, then of course this is the way Washington is seeing it, the current administration is seeing it. If there's a chance for a ceasefire, if there's a chance for a lasting peace, if there's a chance for a negotiation, they believe that there needs to be a negotiation with Putin, and as President Trump calls him, President Putin. Of course, President Zelensky was very powerful in saying that he's ready to be anywhere. He's ready to negotiate anywhere with anyone and negotiate, let's put it this way, even with the devil. And that's what he unfortunately needs to do. That's exactly what he needs to do, to negotiate with the devil. And this readiness is, of course, also what President Trump wanted to see, because he wants to see the Ukrainian side willing to negotiate. And President Trump sees personal negotiations as the only way forward. And respecting this view of President Trump, of course, the American side, the White House in general, is seeing this as an opportunity to get to first the ceasefire and then real negotiations for peace, for a long-lasting, for real peace. And as President Trump said, time will tell. History, I'm sorry, I'm quoting, we should quote right. History will tell. History will put everything and everyone to their place. So this might mean that, of course, the negotiation will take a long, long time, but at least a ceasefire is a possibility. At least this is how President Trump is seeing it.
Alexandra, we understand that Putin's visit to Budapest will put EU and NATO in awkward position. And if Putin again refuses to meet, as he did in Turkey, what should the response be from United States of America? And does repeated rejection of dialogue signal that Russia is not a serious participant in any future peace process?
I think that from Europe, we see that Russia is not willing to negotiate at all. But this is not what the United States are seeing. And this is, they are looking at it as a possibility, as a real possibility. And they believe that there is a real possibility. But I think it's extremely important that right now the US delegation will be headed by Marco Rubio, the state secretary who has been following what Russia is been doing for many, many years now. Marco Rubio, of course, knows the ways of Putin, and he knows the ways of Lavrov. And Marco Rubio is the most professional diplomat in the U.S. Right now in the U.S. administration. So it's extremely important that no other than Marco Rubio is heading this delegation, because I think the American side have seen, and the White House has proven and has decided that for Steve Witkoff, he can negotiate in the Middle East. And he was very successful in the Middle East. Of course, we see right now a ceasefire in the Middle East, and we see all the hostages back in Israel. But there was no such success on the Russian front. There was no such success. A lot of talking, many, many hours of talking, many, many hours of listening to the Kremlin history, and that's Kremlin history, exactly what it is, not the world history, but the Kremlin version of history, and no moving on with the negotiation, nothing about the real negotiation. But for now, as of now, President Trump himself sees this as an opportunity. I think it's important that Marco Rubio will meet with Sergei Lavrov, and Marco Rubio will see through all the games of the Kremlin way better than Steve Witkoff. So maybe the American side will realize what is actually going on. Of course, Putin wants to drag time. He wants to drag time. He wants to talk to Trump. He wants to do everything. He doesn't want to talk to Zelensky at all. It's the last thing he wants to do. He is fearful of this outcome, of course. So hopefully the American side will see that through, and will realize that Putin is just playing Trump. As one of the journalists asked President Trump during his meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky in the White House, aren't you afraid that Putin is trying to play you? President Trump said that he was played by the best of them. He was meaning that he was played by the best of con men in general. They tried to play him, but he made it quite good, as President Trump put it. So he is sure that he can see through Putin's game. But I think it's very important that Marco Rubio will be there, and he will be the first voice that will speak to President Trump. And maybe through Marco Rubio's eyes, they will realize that the situation is quite different from what Putin is telling President Trump.
Alexandra, let's take a closer look at important dimensions of Ukraine-US cooperation. Energy. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced energy projects proposed by Ukraine for its American partners. According to his statement, he emphasized the need to ban the transit of Russian energy resources through Europe, to which the United States expressed readiness to supply the necessary gas and oil to replace Russian deliveries. What specific mechanisms is the United States considering to replace Russian gas and oil supplies in Europe, particularly in coordination with Ukraine, in your opinion?
Well, right now, the situation with Europe, and President Trump stressed it many times, that Europe needs to stop buying Russian gas. Europe needs to stop buying Russian resources. And the question is, where is he wrong? Of course, President Trump is right. Definitely, absolutely. But President Trump saw that for European countries, for certain European countries, it's extremely difficult to do that. It's almost impossible to do that because this will strain their economy. This will be extremely difficult for them economically. But if we look at Ukraine, let's say after at least after the ceasefire, at least when there's no shooting in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian territory, then there is an opportunity, a great opportunity to use Ukrainian resources instead of Russian resources and not falling into the economic trap. Because, for example, if European countries must stop buying, all European countries must stop buying Russian gas and Russian resources. For some of them, it's too expensive to import resources from Latin America, for example, or from other countries of the world, while Ukraine is in Europe. And of course, right now, the European Union and Europe in general, of course, we're including the UK. Europe in general is seeing Ukrainian independence and energy independence as their own energy independence, Ukrainian security as their own security. They are very powerful in including Ukraine fully into all issues of Europe and all issues of the European Union. So there is this opportunity, but this opportunity comes only after a ceasefire, and the Russian side understands that too. And it's in general, it's very important to have those pipelines, to have those resources shipped to, or in any capacity or any way they can be sent to European countries or European Union countries. Of course, it's very important for Ukraine and for Ukrainian energy independence to become part of European energy independence from Russia, and energy independence from dictatorship, and energy independence from any other countries, because Europe is also not eager on buying Middle Eastern, for example, resources. They also don't want to help any dictatorships or any totalitarian regimes there. So this is one of the opportunities that we see and the United States see right now. And the other very important thing, I think, that at the meeting, we saw it during the meeting in the White House, President Zelensky spoke Trump's language: drones in exchange for American weaponry. So something in exchange. President Zelensky came not as someone who is just asking for the weapons. He came in as a businessman. He came in as someone who is offering Ukrainian drones, Ukrainian drone technologies, Ukrainian opportunities with producing drones, and of course the unfortunately huge experience of Ukraine with drones. And this is what the United States need, and that's what Europe needs. Of course, it's a huge irony and very dark irony in the fact that the European Union and NATO didn't want to close the skies of Ukraine at the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Of course, everyone was asking to close the skies of Ukraine, and NATO countries were not ready to do it, while right now Ukraine is helping European Union countries to close their skies, and helping European Union and NATO countries to learn how to secure themselves from Russian drones and from any kind of drones and from Russian planes or from anything. So this is this dark irony that is happening. And the same thing with resources. European Union could not say stop to all Russian resources. Even after 2022 and 2014, they could have started doing that in 2014, of course, when the first attack on Ukraine started, when the war started. and they didn't do it. And right now, they will more rely on Ukraine for resources and for ways to get those resources. So this is, of course, a great way to also see and Ukraine for Ukraine to be not only theoretically but factually part of the European Union, part of those NATO countries, and actually see also for European countries and for NATO countries to see Ukrainian security as their own security and Ukrainian energy independence as their own energy independence. And of course, we can also talk about sending those resources not through Russia, but through Ukraine from other Asian countries, maybe coming in from other countries. And this will also definitely help. And this will also definitely help to see Ukrainian security as part of security of the Western world in general.
Alexandra, thank you so much for the conversation. Today we're joined by Alexandra Filippenko, political analyst and member of the European Leadership Network. Thank you for sharing your insights, and until next time.
Thank you very much. Until next time.